Man, I can't believe I'm writing this. My life has been turned upside down and I'm still trying to figure it all out. It all began with what I thought was just a bad patch in my marriage, but it turned out to be far worse. My wife, now ex-wife, cheated on me with her supervisor, and that was only the tip of the iceberg. Okay, imagine this. I'm 32 years old, and I've been with my wife for 6 years before we married in June 2021. Yeah, right in the middle of the pandemic. Not the best timing, but when you're in love, you make it work, right? Our wedding day was, well, something else. Despite the COVID limits and having to reduce our party list, it was beautiful. I recall gazing at her walking down the aisle and thinking, this is it. This is the woman I'll spend the rest of my life with. I know it's cheesy as heck, but it was how I felt. The first few months of marriage were wonderful. We were in that honeymoon stage, spending every moment together, working from home, eating meals and watching movies. We were in our little bubble of wedded happiness. But suddenly things began to shift. At first, everything happened so slowly that I didn't notice. It was like seeing a tree grow. You don't notice it occurring day after day, but then you glance up and realize it's towering over you. It started when she chose to return to the office. Okay, fair enough. Working at home is not for everyone. But it seemed like she couldn't wait to get away from me. She'd leave early and return late, always with an excuse about a major project or an essential meeting. I tried to be understanding. I understand how difficult her position at this prestigious legal office was. However, it was not only the long hours, it was everything else. Weekends used to be ours, We'd sleep in, have a large breakfast together, maybe go on a hike or binge watch a new show. What about now? She was always in the stables with her horse. Don't get me wrong, I understood how much she enjoyed riding, but she seemed to prefer spending time with the horse than with me. And when did we spend time together? Man, it was like walking on eggshells. She would make these tiny remarks, Stuff like, "Oh, you're still in your pajamas?" at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Or she'd inquire about my work, and when I told her about a project I was proud of, she'd simply laugh it off, like it wasn't good enough. I recall one time when I secured a large client for my marketing agency. I was over the moon, right? I rushed home to inform her, thinking we'd rejoice, but when I told her, she just remarked, "That's nice, honey," in a tone that indicated she couldn't care less. Then she inquired whether I had put out the trash. It was a punch in the gut, I mean, where was the woman that used to cheer for me? The one who'd open a bottle of champagne for even the smallest victory. I tried to speak with her about it, asked if everything was fine and if anything was bothering her, but she would simply brush it off. "I'm fine," she would reply, "just tired from work." And like an idiot, I believed her. Looking back, I can see every red flag. She'd guard her phone as if it contained national secrets. How she would suddenly be required to work late on odd weeknights. She didn't care about the new clothing, the new perfume, or the gym membership before. But you're familiar with what it's like to be in love, right? You do not want to witness the bad stuff. You create excuses. You persuade yourself that you're just being paranoid. So, rather than confronting her, I attempted to resolve the situation. Date evenings, surprise gifts, notes in her lunchbox, all the rom-com cliches. I believed that if I just tried hard enough and showed her how much I loved her, things would return to normal. Spoiler alert, it did not. One night I planned a beautiful supper at home. I prepared her favorite meal, purchased her favorite wine, and even placed rose petals on the table. I know, groan. She came home, took one look at everything and exclaimed, "What? Oh, I've already eaten at the office." Then she walked upstairs to shower, did not even sit with me. I sat alone, staring at those silly rose petals and feeling like the greatest idiot in the world. That was the moment I knew. Something was very wrong with our marriage. I had no concept of how terrible it was. I began paying greater attention to everything. She'd turn her phone face down any time I stepped into the room. How she'd suddenly feel the urge to freshen up before leaving for work, even though she'd just finished her shower. When she got these texts late at night, she'd smile at her phone in a manner she hadn't in months. I awoke about 2 a.m. one night and discovered she was not in bed. I found her in the kitchen, typing furiously on her phone. When she noticed me, she nearly dropped the darn thing. She said she was just reviewing her work emails at 2 a.m. on Saturday. Right. I began losing sleep. Could not concentrate at work. My buddies noticed something was off, but I dismissed it. I mean, what was I going to say? Hey guys, I think my wife's cheating on me, but I have no proof and I'm too chicken to confront her about it. Then came the lipstick incident. Now, my wife has always been into makeup, correct? But she has her regular brands and colors. So when I noticed this bright red lipstick in her handbag, a color she'd never wear, warning bells went off. I asked her about it casually. Oh, that? Jenny at work let me borrow it. Forgot to return it. Sure, honey, sure. But here's the kicker. A few days later, I'm doing laundry and discover one of her blouses with a lipstick smear on the collar. Bright crimson, the same color as that lipstick. I'm not a detective, but last I looked, you don't get lipstick on your collar. I challenged her about this. A big mistake. She flew off the handle, accused me of not trusting her and being domineering, turned the tables on me, making me feel like the terrible guy for even asking. I ended up apologizing. Can you believe it? I apologized for discovering evidence that she was likely cheating on me. After that, she became more cautious, but I became increasingly skeptical. I started to notice other things. For example, she used to come home smelling like cologne. Not my cologne, mind you. Or how she'd suddenly be required to come into the office on weekends for important meetings. I'm not proud of it, but I began snooping. She was checking her phone while taking a shower, looking through her credit card statements. I considered hiring a private investigator, but ultimately decided against it. It felt too much like admitting defeat, you know? One day, I planned to surprise her at work. I bought her favorite meal and hoped to salvage anything from our relationship. When I get to her office, her helper gives me this strange look. Oh, Mrs. My last name isn't here, she explains. She's out to lunch with Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, her boss. She had been working late with the same employer on numerous occasions. The same boss's name was kept up in her texts. I must have looked like I had been punched in the gut, since the assistant hastily added, "Oh, but it's only a business lunch." They do this all the time. All the time. Those comments rang in my head the entire way home. That night, I attempted to gently inquire about her day. How was work? Any interesting lunch meetings? She scarcely glanced up from her phone. Nope, just the usual. I ate at my desk. That was when I knew. I mean, I had guessed before, but that was the moment when I knew for certain. My wife lied to me. So if she was lying about lunch, what else was she lying about? I spent the following few weeks in a daze, going through the motions at work and home. I pretended everything was normal while screaming inside. I'd gaze across the dinner table at the woman I'd loved for years and wonder who the hell she was. I began withdrawing, spending more time at work and the gym, anything to escape being at home with her. And you know what? She hardly noticed. Or if she did, she didn't mind. One night I just couldn't handle it. I had been tossing and turning for hours, my mind racing with all these ideas and suspicions. I turned to her, prepared to unload everything and demand answers. But she was soundly asleep, peaceful. She seemed carefree, and that's when it struck me. She hadn't a concern in the world, because she stopped caring about me. I got up, walked into the spare room, and cried. First time since we got married. I cried for the love I believed we had. We planned for the future, for the man I used to be before everything started eating away at me. The next morning, she didn't even question why I wasn't in bed. She just breezed past me in the kitchen, got her coffee, and departed for work. Did not even say goodbye. I called in ill that day. We spent hours just sitting on the couch, staring at our wedding photo on the mantel. I'm wondering where it all went wrong. Was it me? Did I do anything? Not do anything? Wasn't I enough for her? That's when I made my decision. I couldn't live like this any longer. The mistrust, the doubt, the unsettling knot in my stomach. I needed to know the truth in one form or another. So I devised a plan for catching her in the act. I needed proof, because without proof, I knew she'd just deny everything, turn it around on me again, and make me the bad person. I'm not proud of what happened next. But when you're desperate and your entire world is collapsing around you, you do things you never imagined you'd do. I purchased a tiny camera, a nanny cam shaped like a clock, set up in our bedroom. I felt like throwing up the entire time I was doing it. This was not me. This was not who I was meant to be. But I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes. Looking back, I wish I hadn't put up the camera, because sometimes ignorance is bliss. And what I saw, let's just say there are some things you can't undo. But I am getting ahead of myself. That is a story for another time. For the time being, let me simply say this. Be cautious about what you wish for. Because sometimes the truth is far uglier than you could have imagined. And sometimes, discovering the truth is only the start of your issues. Okay, so there I was with this ridiculous nanny cam installed in our bedroom. I felt like the worst creep, you know? But I was desperate. Desperate for an explanation, confirmation or something, anything to get out of this limbo I was in. For a week, nothing happened. She would come home, go to bed, get up and leave for work. Normal stuff. I was starting to wonder if I was insane after all. Maybe I dreamt it all. Then came Friday. I recall it was a Friday and I had a huge presentation at work. I spent all day psyching myself up for it, nailed it, and even received a good job from the boss. Should have been on top of the world, right? Instead, I am sitting in my car in the parking lot, pondering whether or not to drive home. Finally, I decide to toughen up and confront whatever awaits me. When I go home, I find the house empty. There's no surprise there. My wife had texted earlier that she had a work dinner. Yes, right. So I go upstairs, get the camera, and begin reviewing the footage from the previous week. Bored, boring. Then I come to the footage from that particular day. So there it is. My wife stumbled into our bedroom around midday, giggling like a schoolgirl. And she isn't alone. He is there, her boss, Mr. Johnson, in our home, in our bedroom. I will not go into detail regarding what I witnessed. Let's just say it was graphic and lengthy. And it included items she had previously stated she didn't like or wasn't interested in. I sat there feeling sick, watching my marriage crumble on a little screen, or cry, or both. When it was ended, and believe me, it felt like it went on forever, they lay down and talked, laughing. She stroked his hair and looked at him in the same way she used to gaze at me. Then I overheard it, as clear as day. "I love you," she told him. "I love you too," he responded. "When are you going to leave him?" Him? Me? Her husband. She promised to love and adore him until death do us part. I couldn't watch it any longer. I turned it off, stumbled to the bathroom, and vomited everything I had eaten that day. When I came out, I had a moment of clarity. Do you know how people talk about seeing red when they are angry? For me, everything got chilly, ice cold. I felt empty, hollow. I packed a bag. I just tossed some clothing in and grabbed my laptop and wallet. I left my ring on the dresser. I was about halfway out the door when I heard her car pull up. For a second, I considered confronting her, screaming, yelling, and creating a scene. So what was the point? It was over. It had been a long time, I suppose. So I left. I drove to a motel, checked in, and then sat there, staring at the wall, trying to digest everything I had seen and heard. Around midnight, my phone began to blow up. Texts, calls, and voicemails. Everything comes from her. I disregarded them all. The next morning, I awoke to about 50 missed calls and numerous texts. They began off worried, then angry, and then appealing. The last one simply said, "Please come home. We need to talk." Talk, right, because it will fix everything. I did not respond. Instead, I called my boss and informed him that I had a family emergency and needed some time off. Then I contacted a lawyer. The lawyer listened to my narrative, took notes, and then said something that remained with me. "You're in a fortunate situation here. She cheated. She brought him to your house. You have proof. Do not let her manipulate you. Do not let her manipulate you. It's easier said than done, buddy." I spent the next 3 days in a blur, ignoring her calls, meeting with the lawyer, and figuring out what the hell I was going to do next. On day 3, I finally responded to one of her calls. A big mistake. "Where are you?" she demanded. "Why aren't you returning my calls? I've been worried sick." I was worried about being sick. That is an impressive sum. I know. I replied. Just that. I understand. There was silence on the other end. Next. What do you mean, you know? I saw you, I admitted. You and Johnson. In our bedroom. More silence, then. I can explain. Can explain. As if there's any excuse for screwing your employer in your marriage bed. Don't bother, I replied. I'm filing for divorce. She burst into tears then, begging. Saying it was a mistake meant nothing. She loved me, not him. But all I could hear was her voice on that video. I love you, she'd told him. Not me. Him. I hung up. I turned off my phone, went back to staring at the wall. The following several weeks were a blur. Meetings with the attorney, avoiding her attempts to corner me and explain, packing my belongings when I knew she'd be at work. She tried everything. Tears, wrath, and guilt trips. Even arrived at my parents' house where I had been staying, in the middle of the night, drunk and crying. But I remained firm. The image of her and him on our bed was burnt into my mind. Every time I hesitated, every time I considered giving her another chance, I remembered that video. And my determination would stiffen again. The divorce proceedings were acrimonious. She fought me over everything and attempted to present me as the evil guy. They said I was controlling, inattentive, and forced her to cheat. But I had a secret advantage, the video. Her lawyer saw it and encouraged her to settle, fast. In the end, I received a reasonable payout. I sold the house, half of our money, and my car. She was able to keep her pet horse and her job. I heard through the grapevine that things were a little tense in the office after everything came out. I felt nothing the day my divorce was finalized. There's no relief, grief, or rage, just nothing. I took some time off. I traveled a bit. I tried to figure out who I was without her. It was not easy. There were days when I missed her so badly that it physically hurt. On nights, I'd wake up grasping for her, only to realize she wasn't there. I would never go there again. But day by day, it became simpler. I began to remember who I was before her. I started to like that guy again. I poured myself into work. I got the promotion I had been looking for. We reconnected with old friends, created new ones. And then, approximately a year after the divorce, something unusual happened. I was at a coffee shop working on my laptop when I accidentally spilled my drink all over myself. As I was hastily mopping it up, I heard a laugh. I looked up, ready to snap at the person who was laughing at me, and there she was. This woman had the most stunning smile I had ever seen. "Need some help?" she inquired, immediately reaching for napkins. We got to talking. She was humorous, smart, and kind. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark. That's a possibility. We exchanged numbers, started dating. I took it slowly. I was open about my past and trust concerns. She understood. She had her baggage. It has been 6 months now. Things are going well. Very good. I am not suggesting she is the one or anything. I'm much more cautious about that type of conversation these days. But for the first time since everything happened, I'm thrilled about the future. What about my ex? Last I heard, things with the boss did not work out. Surprise, I know. She attempted to contact me several times, but I quickly blocked her. Some bridges once burned remain burned, so that is my tale. Not quite a happily ever after, but not a catastrophe either. Just life, I suppose. Messy, confusing, and even unpleasant, but always moving forward. If there's one thing I've learned from this, it's to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Remember that you deserve better than someone who would betray you like that. We all do. So, at 33, I was divorced. Not exactly where I expected to be at this stage in my life, you know? One moment you're planning your future with someone, and the next, you're sitting in a lawyer's office, splitting your lives as if it's all just stuff. The initial few months after the divorce was finalized were difficult. I'm not going to lie, some days I hardly got out of bed. I used to look at old images and wonder what went wrong. Was there anything I could have done differently? Is there some sign that I missed? But then I'd remember that video. She's with him, in our beds, and all ideas of reconciliation would gone. I poured myself into work. I figured if I remained busy enough, I wouldn't have time to think about, well, anything. It worked. Sort of. I got the promotion I'd been looking for. Even received a good bonus. But what about returning home every night to an empty apartment? That was tough. I started going to the gym. A lot, like possibly too much. But it's better than drowning my sorrows in a bottle, right? What about all that working out? It helped. Gives me something to focus on, a goal to strive toward. And I'm not going to lie. Looking beautiful didn't hurt my self-esteem. About 3 months after my divorce, I ran into her at the grocery store. Talk about awkwardness. She appeared different, tired, stressed. Part of me felt a sense of accomplishment at this. What about the other part? It simply felt sad. She attempted to strike up a conversation. She asked how I was doing and claimed she missed me. I kept it short, polite but distant. I told her I was fine, wished her well, and got the hell out of there. That night, I received an SMS from her. It was nice to see you. Could we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. I typed out roughly a dozen responses. Delete, type, and delete. In the end, I simply turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, I awoke to a voicemail. Her quivering voice told me she had made a big mistake. She missed me and would do anything to make things right. For a single second, I contemplated it. I considered giving her another chance, but then I remembered the lies, the treachery. The expression on her face in the video was one of love and desire for another man. I deleted the voicemail. I blocked her number. It was time to move on. And you know what? It felt nice. I felt like I was finally regaining control of my life. I began saying yes to stuff. I went out with my coworkers after work. I joined a kickball league. I know, totally lame, but it was great. I even tried cooking lessons. It turns out that I'm not horrible at cooking spaghetti from scratch. 6 months after the divorce, I decided to go on a solo trip. Nothing spectacular, just a weekend trip to a nearby beach town. It felt liberating. No schedule, no one to report to, only me, the ocean, and my thoughts. During that journey, I had a revelation. I was okay. Not fantastic, not perfect, but acceptable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt confident that everything would be well. I was going to feel happy again. I began dating again. Nothing serious at first, just casual coffee dates. It was bizarre. I felt as if I'd forgotten how to do it. But with each date, things became a bit easier. There were some false starts, a few first dates that never turned into second dates. One girl and I dated for a few months before deciding we were better off as friends. But I was not discouraged. For the first time in a long time, I felt enthusiastic about the possibilities. And then, approximately a year after my divorce, I met Jessica. It happened during a cookout hosted by a friend. She was hilarious, intelligent, and had a laugh that just, I don't know, but it made me want to keep making her laugh. We began dating, taking it slowly. I was open about my past and trust concerns. She understood and had her baggage from previous relationships. We worked it out together. It was not always simple. There were occasions when my insecurities flared. There were times when I felt afraid and wanted to go away. But Jessica remained patient, understanding. She never pushed, just stood there. What about my ex? I heard through the grapevine that things with her supervisor did not go well. He didn't want to leave his wife after all. I cannot say I was surprised. She attempted to reach out a couple more times, mostly emails. She said she was sorry, that she had made a tremendous mistake and that she missed me. Every time I received the email, I felt a twinge of something. Not quite agony, not nearly anger, just something. And then I'd erase it and get on with my day. It's been 2 years since the divorce. Jessica and I are still together. We're talking about moving in together and possibly buying a dog. I'm not going to lie. The idea still worries me. But that is a good fear, you know? Like when you're ready to ride a roller coaster, nervous and thrilled. I still think about my ex, not in the I wish we were still together way. More likely, I'm wondering if she's okay, if she has learned from what occurred. I hope she did. Not for her sake, but for the person she ends up with next. As for me, I'm doing well. Very good. The house is coming along well. The work is fantastic. I have terrific friends, a wonderful partner, and a future that I am truly looking forward to. Do I still have moments when I am scared? Where I wonder if Jessica will repeat what my ex did? Sure. However, They are becoming increasingly rare. I guess what I'm saying is that life goes on, even when you believe it can't be. When the pain feels like it's going to swallow you whole, it continues. And if you allow it, if you are open to it, it can be rather fantastic. So that is my tale. Not quite a fairy tale ending, but perhaps something better, something real, something earned.